Hi everybody, how you going? We'll just wait for people to join. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Hey Knowles, on holiday, wish I was on holiday. Hey guys, thanks for joining. Hey Tennille. So you guys might have noticed in the story that I did this afternoon, hopefully you're not too disappointed, that Dr. Sachs is not feeling very well, so he's ditched me. No, he's gonna come and do it again next year. And we've also chatted because we've had so many questions kind of coming in from you guys. So we're actually gonna try to kind of do a bit more of a regular sort of like Q&A as well. So that will be a good series to be kind of doing next year. And I'm also going to be doing it with a few other doctors as well. So on this page, we'll do some Q&As with some doctors. We'll do some maybe with some fertility acupuncturists and then with myself as well. So thank you for joining me anyway. Hopefully you're not too sad that it's only me and not Dr. Sachs. We can just pretend that he's here and I can answer his questions for you. He suggested that we sat and had a wine together while we were doing it. So I won't be having a wine. And now I'm just doing it from my house instead of from his office. So he sends his apologies. And we're definitely going to be scheduling one with him really early next year, because I know that heaps of you have questions that would be really good and useful for Dr. Sachs to answer. So hopefully you're not too sad that it's just me, but I'll do my best to kind of answer the questions and things that you've sent in. So basically, Gavin and I had the idea today to kind of come and chat to you about, your next steps for next year. So what you can be looking forward to for 2022. It's been a bit of a bummer of a year for many people. And I think that, when you're on your fertility journey, it has been a really difficult year. So partners haven't been able to come to maybe all of the appointments. Maybe some of the things you've done have been put on hold, particularly for those of you in Melbourne. A lot of stuff got put on hold there. And for heaps of my beautiful patients that were actually needing to come up to Sydney for their kind of treatments because they're in the middle of, embryo transfers or donor sperm and things like that. And all of these kind of like border changes have been really, really difficult. So what I thought I would do would be to actually just start answering heaps of the questions that have come in. And then we'll start talking about some of those next steps. So if you've got any questions, just fire them away. And I'll do my best to answer them from my perspective. And then, as I said, early next year, we'll pull Gavin back in and then we can go through everything as well. So there has been heaps of questions coming in. Some of them are kind of more medical, some of them are naturopathic. So I'm just going to shoot with them, and then, feel free for you guys to come join in the conversation. Oh, there's a little question thing. Oh, can't wait. Thank you. Okay, so a few people, ways of reducing natural killer cells and ways of reducing natural killer cells. Is that the same question? Okay. That's been a couple on here, is ways of reducing natural killer cells. Now on here, the person Fitzbo 2019 asked, are there natural ways of reducing natural killer cells? Now, for those of you who aren't sure, natural killer cells are basically a type of immune cell that we can have elevated levels of in the uterus, and can affect pregnancy and pregnancy maintenance. So what these little things do is that they're kind of part of the immune system that's searching for things that shouldn't be there in the body. So when we're looking at things like cancer cells and things like that, different types of natural killer cells are actually really useful because they go in, search and attack. Sometimes though, our immune system isn't working kind of perfectly, or is a little bit over responsive. So for example, like somebody might be a bit over responsive to dust. They're like, achoo, achoo, achoo. Their body's like, gosh, dust, dust, dust. Whereas really, maybe they don't need to be having such an over exaggerated response, but it's almost like their body's seeing that as a big issue and having a big reaction. So sometimes what can happen is that we can have elevated levels of these specific natural killer cells in our uterus, and that can affect implantation as well as pregnancy maintenance. Now, the test to kind of get these done is one that Dr. Sachs actually, created or, got sort of going and did heaps of kind of research on. It's a blood test that you can do through Virtus Health and or IVF Australia. I refer my clients for that kind of reasonably regularly if they have been having implantation failure, recurrent miscarriage, and or recurrent failed IVF cycles as well. So it's kind of an expensive test. It's around about $400, but that test will give you an idea as to whether you have elevated levels of these natural killer cells. Now, the usual treatment for elevated natural killer cells would be to go on to Dr. Sax's Bondi protocol. So whether you're doing that with Dr. Sax or somebody else, it's generally called the Bondi protocol. And what it is, it's a mixture of prednisolone, which is an immune suppressant, progesterone, which helps to kind of keep the embryo in the uterus, and clexane, which is a blood thinner. If you are on any of those kind of treatments, do make sure that you're also kind of speaking to a fertility naturopath or nutritionist, because there are nutrient depletions that these drugs cause that we need to correct. So things like folate and calcium in particular. In terms of can you actually reduce high natural killer cells naturally, it's really hard to say. So it may be that you can do some anti-inflammatory immune support and to really help to kind of support natural killer cells, which may help to reduce those down and maintain pregnancy, but it's really difficult. And the thing to kind of remember is that, when we're looking at the medical way of doing it, you're using like prednisolone, so steroids, so quite hardcore immune suppressant medication. And it's very difficult for something natural to work that well. So certainly things like fish oils, high dose, good practitioner only ones so that you get really high dose, high quality, gluten-free, looking at zinc, vitamin C, there's certain herbs as well that can be helpful. But I wouldn't be confident enough to say that if you were diagnosed with really elevated levels of natural killer cells, that those things and or other naturopathic treatments alone would make me comfortable about going into another pregnancy, particularly one that had been associated with loss, particularly rather than, maybe you're not falling pregnant because of these elevated natural killer cells. So if you're trying naturally and you've been found to have sort of mildly elevated natural killer cells, then yes, naturopathic treatment may be useful for that, but generally you are going to need the immune protocols. And so, the way that I work and many fertility naturopaths is that we're quite complementary rather than alternative. And so what that means is that we sort of work alongside specialists and IVF doctors to help you to achieve the result that you're wanting to achieve. So, it may be that you are on the Bondi protocol or some kind of immune suppression protocol, but that we can be working alongside to really minimize the negative effects of any of those medications on you and the baby as well. So someone else has asked, how can you get pregnant with high natural killer cells? So same thing kind of goes. A lot of the time you will need that kind of, that triple therapy or that Bondi protocol. One of the really tricky things is that some people might have had sort of what we call secondary infertility. So maybe in your first baby, you didn't have any issues at all. And in your second child or your second attempt at pregnancy, oops, sorry, someone called. So maybe in that second attempt of pregnancy, you might have been having issues there. If you then have been diagnosed with elevated natural killer cells, it may be that yes, you do need to use medication in a subsequent pregnancy. Other people will need it in their first pregnancy and won't need it in their second pregnancy. So there's certainly a lot that we still don't know and understand about the way that these natural killer cells and immune cells work. It's not like a static thing that means that if you've had it once, you're necessarily going to have it again. You're more likely, but it's possible not to. And likewise, if you've already had children, it is something that you could kind of develop and have issues with later on. Someone else asked, they've had 4 failed frozen embryo transfers with grade A tested embryos. Where to next? What are the tests and what are the options? For that person, like, my heart really does kind of bleed for you, because that's so much time, effort, emotion, physicality, financial investment. The highs and lows of that, and all the lows are probably, just incredible. Embryos are so precious, they're so difficult to make. And so when you know that you've got genetically tested embryos and that they don't take, it can be, absolutely soul destroying and bewildering. I would absolutely, again, be looking at this natural killer cell test. So is there some kind of immune protocol that you may need to be doing to help to support your body to keep the implantation and the pregnancy kind of maintained? Is it that potentially you've got some underlying blood clotting issues? Are there other immune factors? Have you got thyroid problems, low vitamin D? Is there some kind of infection? So some people will have a sort of asymptomatic uterine infection for things like ureaplasma and mycoplasma. These things can be detected on a high cervical swab, not just a vaginal swab. And sometimes they just require a course of really strong antibiotics. Napalm it out, mop it up naturopathically, probiotics and lots of gut healing stuff. There are no sort of symptoms of these kind of bacterial infections, so that could be happening. It may be that you do have endometriosis, so inflammation of the endometrium. This can be checked out via a hysteroscopy, and it may also be useful to do a laparoscopy as well. So is there any endometriosis interfering with implantation? So it can be really frustrating, and a lot of people do think that they've had all the tests done. I would always get a second opinion from that, ideally from somebody like myself and or a second doctor, so that you're actually kind of, really looking at it, because everybody comes thinking that they've had all the tests. So there's two things with that. Often you haven't, you've just done what I affectionately call the you're not dead tests, which unfortunately are just things like, you don't have chlamydia and hepatitis and your rubella's fine, and maybe your thyroid and your liver function's fine, but that may just not be enough. So absolutely looking at those immune factors, blood clotting, looking into thyroid a little bit more. It may be that if you've done all of those things as well, some doctors look at these things called DQ alpha matches, and that's sort of like, are your genetics kind of quite similar to your partner's? There's only a couple of doctors around Australia that are doing that kind of thing. But I think once you do get to that kind of point of doing, 4 failed genetically tested embryo transfers, we really do need to be kind of thinking outside the square. And, pre-COVID, when kind of quite tricky patients would go to America, in America, they just give you every medication known to man, thyroid medication, diabetes medication, blood thinners, immune suppressants. They just throw the whole lot at you. Doesn't matter what your blood tests kind of come back as. Now, that's overkill for probably 95% of people, but it does also tend to kind of yield better results in our more tricky clients, because they really are looking at all of these potential really sort of subtle underlying factors. So I'm not saying that you should just go and get all of that stuff done. Most people kind of don't need that, but it's certainly good to go and speak to another doctor. Having a naturopath or a nutritionist or somebody who does specialize in fertility that isn't your fertility specialist can sometimes be really useful to have alongside your journey. And the reason for that is that lots of my patients will say to me like, oh, I didn't realize that I could go and get an opinion from this person, or, you mentioned that this fertility lab might be better for me because of X, Y, Z. So it is really important, because sometimes we do get a second opinion from somebody, but, if you're getting a second opinion from somebody who works similarly to the person that gave you the original opinion, then, you may not be getting the whole kind of picture. So it really is good to kind of be looking at people who maybe think outside the box a little bit more. So does medication such as Clomid help for male factor infertility? Not really. So male factor infertility is generally really well managed by IVF and assisted reproductive therapies. It also responds really beautifully to naturopathic medicine. One of my most beautiful couples recently came to me, it was probably like 6+ months ago, that we found out that he had a really high level of these things called anti-sperm antibodies. Now, these things were causing his sperm to kind of clump together and not be able to go and fertilize an egg. So we're having fertility problems. So what happened was that the doctors wanted to put him on immune suppressants and low-dose naltrexone, which he wasn't super kind of keen on. And so we decided to do 3 to 4 months of just really hardcore naturopathic treatment. The poor bloke was swallowing so many tablets. And so basically, he took everything. He was amazing. And we agreed that he'd retest his sperm in 3 to 4 months. I didn't want to sell him any false promises. But I wanted to know if this was kind of working. They told me that they were pregnant with twins about 2 months ago. Sorry, they told me they were pregnant about 2 months ago, and yesterday called to say that it was twins. So natural, they were told they wouldn't conceive naturally, they'd have to do IVF and that it couldn't be fixed, and ta-da. So look, to be honest, even I was quite surprised because of how quickly it turned around. The antibodies went from like 60%, which is not great, to about 5%, which is fantastic. He'd retested it, and they're pregnant with twins, which is fantastic, and identical twins, which is, a miracle and fantastic at the same time. So male factor infertility really can be really often quite well managed by naturopathic medicine. And the reason for that is that, sperm only takes around about 90 days to be created, meaning that the sperm that was there 3 months ago isn't there today, and we get a fresh chance, or they get a fresh chance to make that sperm each time. So sperm's really vulnerable to its environment. So what you're eating, what you're doing, what you're taking can make a massive difference with sperm and sperm quality. And a lot of you will probably know that, particularly if you've gone through into the IVF kind of world, it's such a kind of paternalistic, little secret society. Always kind of drives me a bit crazy, because the sperm parameters, they can be like not even perfect, and a doctor will often say, oh no, it's kind of fine, don't worry about it. But yet for the woman, you've had like a million tests, and everything kind of comes down to egg quality and all these things that can't be tested. I truly think that one day, if and when we can test egg quality, we're probably going to kind of have this situation where like, oh, the sperm's fine, oh, the egg's fine. And so what are we looking at is going to be the health of both of you together. And so, it is really important to be looking at that. There was some research released yesterday, I think it was in the Daily Telegraph. So, no, it was actually in a study, but, the Daily Telegraph reported it, saying, how important the health of sperm was for fertility. Surprise, surprise, that's news that the male factor would actually, be an important part of the creation of that baby. I don't think any of us are super surprised about that news, but hopefully what it will do is to start to really kind of push into the men that the health of their sperm is really important. So the semen analysis can kind of look okay, but we still need to make sure that the DNA and the health and all the nutrients and things like that in the sperm is really good. So if you've got male factor fertility issues, absolutely go see your naturopath and or nutritionist. Another question, embryos are not going past day 3. Fertility specialist says it's egg quality. Can I do anything? Yes, you can. Don't be told that egg quality can't be changed. We see it all the time. Okay. So basically when embryos aren't kind of going past day 3, there's a couple of things happening there. So what we want them to do is to go from, fertilization, day 3, day 5, obviously the little days in between important as well. So quite often from fertilization to day 3 is usually more about egg quality, and day 3 to 5 is often about sort of sperm quality or embryo quality. So if they're not progressing properly, then we do need to kind of look at the health of the egg and the sperm. So the sperm, you want to make sure you get a DNA fragmentation test done. So it's an extra part. It's about an extra $300. Sorry about that. On top of the general semen analysis. And that way then we can see if the sperm's fragmented or broken down, which might be stopping it kind of moving along. If it does look like it's kind of coming down to egg quality, then there are lots of things that you can do. Now, the most important things are getting your diet and lifestyle under control. So we know that women who don't have enough protein in their diet don't make as good quality eggs. We know that women who have too much sugar, too many carbohydrates, don't produce as good quality eggs. So if you do have, that you're having your protein, your good fats, your something fresh, you're eating really well most of the time, you don't have to be perfect. Have a couple of drinks here and there, just not too much. You don't have to be perfect, but you do need to make sure that about 80 to 90% of your diet is as healthy as possible. And so once you've done that, then it probably does come down to looking into supplements, or is there a reason that these eggs may not be as good quality? Vitamin D is so important. So all the people that have been in lockdown, in a winter in Sydney or Australia, get your vitamin D levels checked. The range for vitamin D is usually about 50 to 150, or some of the labs are now doing 50 to 250. And for egg quality, you really want that level to be around about 110 to 140. So really up that kind of like upper end of the range. So supplementing with vitamin D may be really useful. There's also heaps of supplements, antioxidants that can really help egg quality. So things like resveratrol, NAD+, N-acetylcysteine, glutathione, vitamin C, vitamin E, ubiquinol's a big one. You know, there really are so many kind of antioxidants that we can be using. So it's a good idea to kind of check in with a naturopath, because what often happens is people start supplementing themselves with heaps of vitamins, which is awesome, but the quality of the vitamins are really important. And so the packet of what you get might say it's got 150 milligrams of ubiquinol, for example, but does it? And I don't know. Nobody knows the answer to that. Whereas I guess the Australian practitioner only supplements, they're all third party tested, and they actually have to have 150 milligrams of ubiquinol in them. So some of the ones that you're buying on the internet or from the supermarket might have 50 milligrams of ubiquinol, or might have 150, or might have none. They do often have other fillers and things like that. So, you know, if you really are investing into this, do make sure that you're getting good quality vitamins. But there is lots that we can do with egg quality. And it's really exciting, I guess, for kind of naturopaths and people who work in the fertility space, because we're seeing it happening in real time all the time. So somebody who might not have had good egg quality, maybe their embryos weren't going past day 3, like that person mentioned. And then, you know, we work for a couple of months, ideally 3. I'm usually racing against the clock with my clientele because they're usually a little bit older. So we don't always have 3 months, but, you know, when they do another cycle, we often see really big improvements. For those of you who've just joined recently and are wondering where Dr. Sachs is, he's not feeling well. So I'm really sorry that it's just me and my chatting to myself. We're going to do one with Dr. Sachs early next year, so we'll absolutely notify you all then. Okay, so how can you treat reoccurring ureaplasma naturally? So this person's already been on antibiotics 3 times. My gosh, you poor thing. So basically, it is an imbalance of your good and bad bacteria. So if you're getting recurring ureaplasma in the uterus, yes, you do need to do the antibiotics. Has your partner had the antibiotics? So, you know, you both really do need to be treated, and often both need to be treated for 2 weeks and retested to make sure that you're not just giving it backwards and forwards to each other. If that's the case and that's been done, you're really wanting to be looking at your gut health. So, you know, do you have some probiotics there? Do you have heaps of fiber in your diet? It may be that we need to add a specific probiotic called SB, or Saccharomyces boulardii, which can be really helpful. I would probably also be putting in some high-dose garlic supplements, and there are other herbs that you can use, but a lot of the other antibacterials you can't use while you're trying, but garlic's always a winner. So really trying to kind of reduce and cut out sugar out of your diet. But I think probably if you've had it 3 times, my gut feeling is your partner hasn't been cleared and you guys are just passing it backwards and forwards to each other. So definitely kind of get that tested. So testing that I can request after recurring implantation failure of quality embryos. Oh, we answered that before with the person who'd had the 4 failed embryo transfers. Suggestions for those with PCOS struggling to conceive when insulin is normal. Now, PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, is, you know, can affect kind of conception and pregnancy in some people. Now, the insulin resistance, which is quite common in women with PCOS, doesn't always come up in the blood. You could be slim, you could eat well, your insulin, your glucose is totally fine. And if that's the case, there is still a chance that you have insulin resistance in the ovaries. Now, there's a supplement called myo-inositol that's been shown to be really useful. It's actually been shown to be on par with metformin, which is a diabetes medication, for women with PCOS trying to conceive. Really safe, and you can be doing it all the way through the pregnancy to help to reduce gestational diabetes as well, which is kind of awesome. So I guess the main thing with the PCOS and trying to conceive is that, you know, are you ovulating regularly? So one of the biggest issues is actually kind of regular ovulation. So if you are ovulating regularly and having about a 14-day luteal phase, that's the second half of the cycle. If you're noticing that like that is kind of fairly standard and you're still not kind of conceiving, yes, looking at insulin resistance is kind of really important. So looking at what you're eating, how you're exercising, and maybe looking at something like inositol. Then also too, I guess when you do have a hormonal condition, often people stop investigating why else you're not falling pregnant. It's like, oh, that person's got PCOS, or that person's got endo, or that person's 42, as though that all of those things preclude any other issues that you might be having. So make sure that you do still get a really good fertility workup. Is the sperm okay? Are there blood clotting issues? You know, is there any kind of like immune problem going on at the same time? There is a correlation in women with PCOS having an increased risk of thyroid problems. So is that a problem? So really making sure that you're getting a really good workup of what else you can be doing. If testosterone's too high, that can be affecting ovulation as well. So things like zinc can be really useful for that. Spearmint tea, I know sounds like super basic, but a couple of cups of spearmint tea a day, spearmint, not peppermint, has been shown to reduce excess testosterone levels, but won't lower it too much, which is good and lucky. Okay, so is it safe to have remedial massage during the 2-week wait? Absolutely, yes, it is. Does leaving endo increase implantation rates? I've written these down, so I've just done them really specially. I'm terrible at writing, and I wrote all your questions down on a piece of paper, so I should have just copied and pasted. I'm assuming that's going to say, does removing endometriosis improve implantation rates? Dr. Sachs and I have had this conversation before, and he's like, no, it's more about kind of like egg quality, but could affect implantation. I see it all the time where people do get endometriosis removed and then fall pregnant and can improve implantation rate. So, absolutely. So I think, if there is endometriosis there and it's there, it is worth probably having a laparoscopy if you're symptomatic, because what you've got to remember is that post-pregnancy, you're still going to have heaps of periods left. And so having more comfortable periods is a bonus, and then it could also help with implantation rates. There's always a really tricky fork in the road that I find with many of my fertility clients, where it's kind of like, is it endometriosis? So should you have a laparoscopy, or do you just go and do IVF? Now, lots of women that I see have what I call silent endometriosis, where they don't know that they've got endometriosis. Their periods are not very painful, but maybe their egg quality is not great for their age. Maybe they've had failed IVF cycles. Maybe, they've had recurrent failed IVF cycles and nobody really knows what's kind of going on. I would always think about, is endometriosis a factor there? The amount of patients that I've had that, have had multiple rounds of unsuccessful IVF or losses or implantation failures and aren't your classic, endometriosis patients. They don't have terrible period pain, nothing much kind of going on there. And I kind of flag the fact that maybe they do have silent endometriosis, have gone and gotten laparoscopic surgery, which is the only way to diagnose. You can't tell from an ultrasound. So if someone says you don't have it from an ultrasound, it's not 100% correct. All it means is that the endometriosis hasn't caused your ovaries, your bowel, your uterus, and all your bits to kind of stick together, but it doesn't show whether you've got endometriosis or not. So the amount of people that I've had that have gone and had a laparoscopy, had endometriosis removed, and fallen pregnant naturally in the next couple of months is unbelievable. And these are women and couples who've done, 3, 4, 5 rounds of IVF. So it is really important to kind of look into that. There's always that fork in the road, like I mentioned. And that fork is basically, do I go and do a laparoscopy, which is keyhole surgery? You're not going to get pregnant from laparoscopy. If you do, that's really weird. No, you won't. Or do you just do an IVF cycle where there's a chance that you might fall pregnant? You're going to be out of pocket the same amount, and you get a good idea as to kind of what's going on with your fertility. So if it's not a classic, you probably do need a laparoscopy. You've got terrible period pain, or other signs of endometriosis, digestive issues, painful intercourse, maybe the hycosis, the tube flush was really painful. I always kind of like, endometriosis. For everyone else, it just should be weird and uncomfortable rather than like excruciating pain. So for those people that it's not quite, you're not quite sure, it may be that you are better off doing one IVF cycle. And if you're not getting the results you expected, or they're saying, you're only 35, but egg quality is not great, and we're like, really, why would that be? That might be that you do go and look at getting a laparoscopy. If you do, make sure that you're going to somebody who just does endometriosis laparoscopies day in, day out. My favorite is Dr. Vince Lamaro. Professor Alan Lamb is also kind of good. Vince sees most of my patients and is amazing. He only operates and does laparoscopy if he thinks that he needs to, which is great, rather than just, for the sake of it, just to kind of check. So you won't be sort of necessarily pushed into that, but it is something that's kind of worth exploring, because not everybody has a classic, yes or no, it's endometriosis. So usually when you do have a laparoscopy, which is the keyhole surgery, they'll often do a hysteroscopy at the same time. Got to put my hands down. I'm always like, hysteroscopy. Okay, let's not act it out. Hands behind my back. And so the hysteroscopy, which is kind of just like a looking sort of thing, but inside the uterus, can see if there's any scar tissue, but can also see if there's any endometriosis or inflammation, which is usually treated with antibiotics. So, it is really important to make sure that you're actually having those physical examinations if you've had recurrent implantation failures or kind of recurrent miscarriage as well. So really important to kind of be looking at that, multiple failed IVF cycles. If you're sort of 35, 36, even maybe 37 and under, and they're saying like egg quality is not great, not getting that many egg numbers, I'm always kind of like, is there endometriosis there? So it's definitely something that is worth exploring, and certainly getting rid of it or removing it via laparoscopy or surgery, keyhole surgery, certainly can help implantation. And a lot of the time they would say to you, try naturally for at least a few months afterwards, because you do really have an increased, an increased risk of pregnancy, but an increased chance of pregnancy, which would be great. Okay, so somebody else has asked what foods are best for implantation in the 2-week wait. So basically, I'm a big fan of not just eating completely different foods in that 2-week wait and where you are kind of like in your IVF cycle. And the reason for that is that, when we eat something, unless you're eating something that you're intolerant to and it creates some degree of inflammation, then usually it doesn't completely change your internal environment, alkalinity, inflammation, nutrient balance or anything like that. It's more about the way that, what we eat over time and how that kind of works out like that. So for example, some people will say like, oh, eating pineapple, in the 2-week wait's great because the bromelains from pineapple are good for implantation. Now look, yes, bromelains are great for implantation. However, just eating them at that time, they don't suddenly just all go down into your uterus and make the whole thing kind of more receptive. Is that bromelains can then help with the blood flow in the uterus, but it's going to be over time. So if you want to eat pineapple, but I don't know that you necessarily need to do it there. There are also those people that go and eat McDonald's fries after their transfer because they think that that's going to improve their implantation rates as well. I don't think that's going to be the case. I'd love someone to do a study on it. I don't know that anybody will because I don't feel like there's that much money in it. Maybe Macca's could do it. I don't think they're going to get very positive outcomes though. Now, if you want to do that and you feel like, no, like that's a thing I want to do, go for it, do it, right? The small amount of inflammation that would create. So what we know is that we need to have a certain small amount of inflammation at the time of implantation, which is why we often stop fish oils just before our transfer and then start them again just a little bit afterwards. And things like turmeric as well, we don't tend to kind of do those around implantation in IVF because we want there to be a little bit of inflammation. But what we eat isn't going to necessarily directly cause inflammation initially, unless, say, for example, you're having like dairy and that just gives you complete like diarrhea. You don't want that type of inflammation. If you have, say, some gluten, if you are celiac or gluten intolerant, then maybe that's going to cause a more sort of a faster level of inflammation, but it's not the level of inflammation that you're wanting. So realistically in that 2-week wait, what we're wanting to be having the foods that we've been having the rest of the time. So as most of you know, my healthy eating mantra of what you need to be eating is that with each meal and most snacks, we're wanting to be having a source of protein, some good fats and something fresh. Okay, so protein are things like meat, chicken, fish, eggs, nuts, seeds, hummus, legumes. Doesn't have to be meat. Protein, as we said, is one of the biggest indicators of egg quality. So it's really important that you have enough protein. There has been so many kind of multiple studies on women, particularly lower weight women, being protein deficient and not having as good egg quality. So please bump up your protein. Now, don't just go and have a hunkin' big steak and a piece of bread. You need to balance it out with your vegetables. So remember, we're having our protein, our good fats, and our something fresh. So the something fresh should be about 4 to 5 cups of vegetables and or salad a day. Try to get a really good variety of colors for antioxidants. It's going to give you fiber. It's going to help to balance your hormones, help to kind of keep the environment nice and alkaline, help to kind of keep the bacterial balance really kind of happy and healthy as well. So our uterus also has heaps of kind of bacteria in there. We want it to be predominantly lactobacillus. That's really important for implantation. So lots of different vegetables and different varieties of veggies and salads are definitely going to be helpful with that. Don't be scared about fruit. So people get all like, oh my God, fruit's sugar. You can absolutely have a couple of pieces of whole fruit a day. So try not to have things like fruit juice and too much dried fruit and fruit purees and things like that, which are quite high in fructose, and you're probably eating more of them than you would in a piece of fruit. But a couple of pieces of fruit is really important. There's a study, a big ongoing study called the Earth Study, which stands for environmental impact or reproductive something or other. Anyway, it's a big study and it's following like thousands of couples going through their fertility and assisted reproductive journey. And it's looking at their diet, their lifestyle, their chemical exposure, all that kind of stuff. And so that study found that people who didn't eat fruit took longer time to conceive. It also showed that people who didn't eat fish took longer time to conceive. All my patients are on fish oil, so yay for you guys. It also showed that people who ate more fast food took longer time to conceive. So like, not rocket science, but again, we don't want to kind of completely take out fruit. So a couple of pieces of fruit a day, amazing, going to help with sugar cravings as well. So that's our protein. Then we've got our good fats and we've gone through our something fresh. So good fats, our hormones are made of fats, all right? If we don't have fats in the diet, we don't make as much cholesterol, and then a lot of our hormones come from cholesterol. So we don't want too much cholesterol, but don't want too little. So things like avocado, nuts and seeds, hummus, tahini, olive oil's fantastic. So the diet that comes out on top for fertility every single time is the Mediterranean diet. And so what they've looked at is what's the difference between like a general healthy, low processed diet and the Mediterranean diet. It's olive oil. So what they've found is that both diets are kind of quite similar, but the Mediterranean diet with its addition of olive oil came out on top for fertility every time. So, it is really important that we're getting that protein, fats, and fresh, and that you're getting a good variety of different foods in your diet. Now, this time of year, let's not all get really like narrow and they're the only things I can have and none of us can have coffee and alcohol and a piece of cake or anything like that. If you want to do that, yay for you, go for it. But I think the thing with fertility is that because there is stuff that we can control in fertility, or there's ways that we can kind of optimize our fertility. So it might be eating these foods or avoiding too many inflammatory foods and nutrient poor foods. We start to think that like whether we've conceived or not is 100% up to us. And I think it's a very female thing. If there's some men watching, maybe it's a male thing as well, but it's very female thing for us to kind of control it, right? And the reason for that is that most of us have kind of had the experience of where what we do, we get the result for. So for example, you study for the exam, you get a good mark. You work hard at the job, you get a promotion. You save, maybe you can buy a house or go on a holiday, get a new car, whatever it is. So we very much that kind of like we work for the reward that we get. And a lot of you will probably be able to kind of, empathize with this or resonate with this, where I say, a lot of what you do with fertility, you're doing all this hard work and it's not giving you the result that you've wanted. Why didn't I fall pregnant this month? I did all these things. I didn't do that. I took my supplements. We tried at the right time, or we did an IVF cycle and it didn't work. And so we start to feel really out of control, and that's a horrible feeling. Nobody really loves that feeling, or if you do, yay. But most people I see don't love that feeling at all. Would you guys agree? So it's that lack of control. And so what it can kind of turn into then is like, I'm going to make this so tight. We're going to have no alcohol, no coffee, no sugar, blah, 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 blah. And if that's the case and it feels great for you, yay, it's probably the best way to eat. But it's what you're eating most of the time, right? So if you're doing that most of the time, but then you do feel like going out and having some Thai and a glass of wine, or a piece of pizza and an Aperol spritz. I mean, don't do it every single day, but here and there, it's actually okay. Whilst you're on an IVF cycle, I would say don't drink and don't have coffee. Anything that can create inflammation or can potentially harm any of your cells, we don't want to be doing. But if you've been trying for a while and it's Christmas and things, what I've said to most of my clients over the last couple of weeks is choose, once a week, go for it. Once a week, enjoy yourself. We've got to unfortunately settle in with this for the medium term, right? So, for example, if you're doing, say, egg freezing in 3 months, be as sort of like strict as possible, so that you know that what you put into the freezer You did everything you could. It's the best quality that it could be. If you've been on this journey for a little bit longer, so it might be, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, 6 years, I don't know. Like a lot of you have been doing this for a long time. So what we want to be able to do is to kind of like get enough balance so you could keep doing this, hopefully not, but potentially for another 6+ months, right? Not just what you can do for a month. So, don't not enjoy Christmas or seeing your family or going to visit people from other states and things like that. But it might be that you're like, do you know what? I'm going to have a drink or two at, Christmas Day and New Year's Day, eat what I want on those days, and then sort of, be sort of like a bit more mindful in between times, for example. So, work out what's right for you, but know that if you didn't conceive this month, it's not because you had a slice of pizza or a piece of cake, all right? So don't go crazy on those things, but, just be really kind of like gentle with yourself as well. It's been a bit of a shitty year all round. So, enjoy the summer. And then what we want to do is to kind of, I guess, keep working towards that kind of optimal fertility and having a really kind of good plan for next year. So foods to avoid in the 2-week wait for implantation. Everybody loves the different foods in the 2-week wait. And I think, again, it comes back to that, like, we're so out of control. There's like, well, what can I control while I'm waiting? That 10 to 12 days is like the longest 10 to 12 days in the whole world, right? So, I guess in that time, people definitely are wanting to be doing something that is... Mia, can you turn that off, please? Sorry, just have to have a little bit of background noise there. Can you turn off the background noise? Sorry, everybody. Just everybody forgot that I was on the live. So, as I said, like we tend to want to kind of control in that time because like what else can we do that is saying, well, wait till the test now, and we don't want to wait till the test. We want to do everything that we can. So something you can do in that 2-week wait is some gentle walking, is lots of Netflix, is some acupuncture, is some meditation, and just trying to kind of eat healthily and well, lots of early nights, and just try to distract yourself. I know that sounds bad, but get into like a Netflix series, go to the movies if you feel comfortable doing so. Just do really kind of like gentle things to kind of get you through that time. But there's no real foods that are going to make it or break it, basically. So in terms of things to avoid though, if you've got any autoimmune issues, any inflammation issues, or any issues with kind of thyroid, then definitely trying to kind of avoid gluten, I would say. I would definitely keep sugar at a minimum, so we know that embryos don't like a high glucose environment. So really trying to kind of keep your sugar intake low. If you have a piece of dark chocolate here and there, go for it, right? But just try not to kind of go, oh, I'm going to have, cake and hot chocolate and banana bread for breakfast and things like that. So keep trying to go with that protein, fats, and fresh. The other thing that's really important in that 2-week wait to include is water. So when we're well hydrated, we're going to actually be able to kind of keep the blood flow to the uterus really nice and kind of flowing. So we keep the kind of lining of the uterus really kind of like plump, so to speak, which is going to be better for implantation. So really trying to kind of get at least 30 mils per kilogram of body weight. So if you weigh 70 kilos, that's like 2.1 litres of water a day. So really important to kind of do that there. So last question on here. So if you've got any more, put them into the questions on the little question box thing down the bottom there. I don't know how you do that, but I know how to read them. So the best thing to do for a successful frozen embryo transfer. So for a successful frozen embryo transfer, you really do want to kind of, I guess, know what you're doing leading up to that. So we're trying to kind of create a uterine environment that's going to be as healthy as possible for that kind of, couple of months beforehand. So definitely look at increasing hydration, decreasing sugar intake, increasing protein and vegetables. I probably put in a probiotic, one that's quite heavy on the lactobacilli. I'd be looking at, say, some good quality fish oils, potentially some zinc, some N-acetylcysteine as well. Making sure that you are on a really good quality preconception multivitamin. So you can order the Natural Best preconception multivitamins for men and women. Remember, the men are half of the equation here, so we want them to be as healthy as possible. You guys can jump onto my online store in the link in my bio, I think. Those ones you don't need to have a prescription to order, so you can just kind of grab those on there. So making sure that you're on something good quality. So a lot of the commercial ones are not very good quality, and if you compare how much is in each of them, often not kind of great. And this one also has folate in the form of methylfolate, which is one that all of us can break down and metabolize, which is really important for pregnancy maintenance as well. So if you've got questions, just pop them in the comments. The other thing too is I have created some ebooks for you guys. So I've got the IVF support ebook and the natural fertility ebook. They're on my website, so you can jump onto the link in the bio. They've got beautiful recipes, they've got meal plans, they've got all the information that I was just talking about in terms of research from that Earth study. So things that you should be doing, eating, how important is sleep, what to eat, what not to eat, and it's all backed up with science and all the references are in there. So if you want a good Christmas present to yourself, it's not too expensive. I don't know how much it is, maybe $22. Who knows? If it's not, let me know and I'll give you a code for it. So you can jump on and do those, and or you can do my online courses. So again, I've got the IVF support or the natural fertility support as well. You probably don't need to do both of them. The recipes are the same. So, that's important. Okay, so how about a detoxification program? Good question. So, before you start trying to conceive, if you can do a preconception program, basically, where you're getting your body ready to fall pregnant. So you might do some really gentle detoxification, some cleansing, really trying to kind of get all of your nutrient levels up, check that all your nutrients are kind of good, is a great thing to do. As I mentioned before, most of my patients are racing against the clock and we don't usually have time to stop and detoxify if there's not a particular need for it. So I guess gentle detoxification will kind of happen anyway in terms of getting your diet and lifestyle, getting your bowels moving kind of properly. But if you do have a little bit more time to do a little bit more of a kind of more proper detox, really working the liver, the kidneys, the bowels, before you start trying, that's the optimal time to be doing it. As I said, for the guys with people who've just joined, Dr. Sachs ditched me. Now, he's not feeling well at the moment, so we're going to reschedule him to early next year, and we're going to do this a little bit more regularly with other doctors and people who are working in the fertility space as well. Question from, can you reduce ways of reducing NK cells? We did that. So you might have to go back to the beginning. I'm going to save this in my IGTV so you can go back and look at that. Question marks on thoughts on taking CBD oil preconception. So CBD oil, a little bit illegal in Australia unless it's prescribed by a doctor, but also quite lovely. I think it's fine preconception. There's not heaps of research on it because it's not legalized in Australia very much. So I think it's probably okay preconception, but I wouldn't be taking it through pregnancy. There's probably other options if you're using it for sleep or anxiety that are 100% fertility friendly. So eating whole grains important for preconception and or implantation. Which whole grains do you recommend? So whole grains, yeah, you can be doing those as well. So I guess what's not in my protein, fats and fresh is the starchy, carby stuff like whole grains. It's not that you can't have those, it's just that if you do, it should be the accompaniment to the meal rather than the basis of the meal. So if you're looking at your plate, I'd like you to ideally be having half of it being veggies and salad, say a third of it being, or like 30% of it being protein, and then maybe 20% of it being a starchy carb. Your non-gluten grains are going to have more nutrients in them. So things like buckwheat, quinoa, brown rice, are fantastic. And if you're using sort of gluten-y grains, trying to go with maybe like a rye or a spelt or a sourdough. But again, making that the accompaniment to the meal rather than the basis of the meal. It's what I call shut-up food. It fills you up and it shuts you up, but nutritionally doesn't do much for you. For those of you who are quite low weight and difficult to put on weight, you do need to be a certain weight to fall pregnant as well. I have a certain body fat percentage, so don't forget to add those starchy carbs. For the rest of the 80-90%, you're probably needing to reduce them. So that's where it kind of comes into seeing somebody who can individually sort of help you. Digestive issues, gut issues, how to go about it. Massive question. So basically, gut issues and dysbiosis or not having the right balance of good bacteria can affect implantation. They're starting to kind of come out some testing with your vaginal and your uterine environment as to the good bacteria and the bad bacteria and what's important there. So starting off, I would kind of say drink more water, do a probiotic, try to get 4 to 5 cups of vegetables a day, and then you may need to get some sort of more individualized kind of help with what to do. You can also jump onto the courses page of my website, link in the bio, and do my 7-day nutrition reset course. It's just a short course that takes you through how to get the protein, fats, fresh snacks, exactly what to do. And that normally fixes up your digestive system. How to improve, so I'm rushing because I'm going to get clocked out here at an hour. How to improve sperm health. Apologies if you've already covered this or not related. We cover everything. I jump around all over the place. So in sperm health, we did talk a little bit more about that before. So you can look back and kind of see what we did talk about earlier. But basically, we didn't talk about this part. Regular ejaculation. So we want to keep the sperm turning over and make it kind of really healthy. Really trying to kind of reduce and avoid anything that can be toxic to sperm. So things like, mobile phones in the pockets near them. There's lots of studies saying that's not fantastic. Sperm's also really affected by chemicals. So, looking at what perfumes and aftershaves and things like that are kind of being used on the body and in the house, bleaches, the way that you kind of use cleaning products, really important to try to kind of improve that. Definitely looking at food. So trying to increase that protein, fats, and fresh. Lots of nuts, lots of vegetables, really important. Lots of water, and really try to reduce and or minimize caffeine and alcohol, and of course any recreational drugs and cigarettes. Vaping, so bad for sperm. So many people are doing it. I don't get it. Does anyone get it? I guess you're addicted. If you get it, you're addicted. Try not to do it though, because it really does affect kind of sperm and egg quality and health as well. So regular ejaculation, getting exercise, making sure body weight's as good as possible, lots of veggies, not too much kind of sugar, and then you can be looking at sort of supplemental help on top with a naturopath if you've got that kind of done. Last question, I'm going to go, oh, hang on, there's one more there. Oh. Do you agree with birth control as a means for managing PCOS symptoms? Good question. Not really related to live, but I'm going to go with it anyway because I love it. So basically, if you've been told you've got PCOS, so therefore you need to go on the pill to manage it, no, that's not really managing it, okay? And so what it basically means is that you feel like you're getting a regular cycle, but it's not really a cycle, it's a synthetic cycle. So the only reason that could be useful is that if you had the type of PCOS where you weren't getting a period at all, and it had been like a year or two, and people were worried about your estrogen being so low that, that was not helping with your bone density and or your cardiovascular kind of like health, that would be the only small benefit of going on to the pill for PCOS symptoms. Otherwise, because PCOS is generally so not easily managed, but can be managed via diet, lifestyle, nutrition, supplements, you're probably actually better off managing it like that, because PCOS is like a metabolic condition. So it's usually characterized by increased insulin resistance, maybe increased kind of testosterone. And so it's really managing those underlying drivers of PCOS to then be able to kind of manage your hormones going forward. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sorry to have the downer that Dr. Sachs wasn't here. Ditched me last minute. No, he's going to come next time for sure. And I'm going to jump into his office and we can like fight with each other how we do. No, not really. We have good, meaningful, good kind of debate. We come from kind of like different angles sometimes, but we share so many clients and we have so much success together with so many of our clients that it's really fantastic. So thank you for joining us. If you do have any other questions and things, pop them into the comments. Jump onto my online store. You can see all the beautiful collagen products. You can be looking and buying your prenatals on there. You can have a look at my online courses and then, buy yourself one of the ebooks for Christmas. And that's going to have heaps of information in there that's really easily broken down, but all comes from the latest kind of like scientific research. So I'm definitely planning on doing more of these next year, maybe the first Wednesday of each month. I'm going to let you guys know. But thank you so much for joining us, or joining me, not us. Sorry, it's not an us and it's just a me. And thank you so much for kind of all your questions and interest in everything. And I wish you all so much kind of baby dust for summer now. Is summer coming? Now and early kind of 2022. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Bye. Mia?